Hello and welcome to another how-to video with Kurzweil. In this video, we're having a look at the K2061 and some creative V.A.S.T programming inspired by the Juno-60. We're going to cover this in two parts. In this first part, we're going to make that patch you heard at the beginning from scratch using only one single saw wave. It's meant to be a modified, expanded version of the Juno single oscillator structure, and with all these physical controllers, that one single oscillator can go all the way from this to this. For context, Kurzweil programs can have 32 of these layers at once, each with multiple waveforms, filters, and samples. So while this patch may be on the simpler side, it should give you some insight into how to make the most out of your V.A.S.T programming. In the next video, which is going to be the second part of this topic, we'll be replicating the entire structure of the Juno without modifying it. Also, I'd recommend being set up with your own K20 or similar Kurzweil synth so you can follow along with all the steps in the video. First, I'm going to enter 2045 on a number pad to select the silent program. Next, press Edit. The first step here is to set up a sound source. We'll be using an actual waveform oscillator for this as opposed to audio samples or a key map. While that is the case, I'm still going to select a saw wave key map here, and that's number 174. I'll explain why I did that in a second. For now, let's go to the algorithm page. In the first block here, I'm going to select Shape Saw. With this oscillator, I can change the shape of the waveform, which I'm going to use later to bring in some subtle variations in the patch. So when I've got an oscillator in my algorithm, the sound is going to be from that DSP block and not the key map. That is, unless I add a mix block in my signal chain to mix the key map signal in. But the reason I selected a key map is so that the oscillator can follow the envelope information of the key map. So my shaped saw is going to follow the attack, sustain, decay, and release curves of the key map. This way, I don't need to set up a user envelope and I can directly assign physical controllers for the envelope. So let's go to the amp envelope page. Since I have the key map, I'm going to let natural mode remain as opposed to user mode. So I'm going to set up sliders 1 to 3 for attack, decay, and release. I'm simply moving to each source box, holding enter, and then moving the slider that I want to assign. For depth values, I'm setting the minimum numbers for attack and release. This way, I'll have the shortest attack and release times when the sliders are down all the way, and they get longer as I turn them up. For my decay slider, on the other hand, I've set the maximum value, so my decay value is going to get shorter and thereby more like a pluck as I bring the slider level up. These envelope controls and how they've been set up are just my personal workflow. You can set them up differently if you want, or even set up a user envelope. Now let's move to our DSP mod page and set up some modulation sources for the oscillator block. With these next few steps, we'll be giving this plain sounding saw wave some of that analog character with subtle changes in waveform shape and pitch. First, I'm going to set my saw shape value to 60. Using the arrow keys, I'm going to move to this column here and assign a mod source. So I want the shape of this waveform to be constantly shifting. I'll be using an LFO for this. So while I'm in the source 1 dialog box, I'm going to enter 114 to assign LFO 1 as source 1. My depth value is going to be 12. To finish setting up this LFO, we'll be moving to the LFO plus page. For LFO 1, I'm going to select a minimum rate of 0.3 Hz. For the LFO shape, I'm going to select sine. So let's see what this sounds like. Now for some pitch variance. I'm going to set up two instances of pitch modulation. One of them is going to be done using an LFO, which is then further controlled using Aftertouch. The second one is going to be a randomized pitch modulator, with the mod wheel controlling its depth and intensity. So let's set all of this up on the LFO Plus page. I'll be setting up the following values for LFO2. A minimum rate of 3 Hz and a maximum rate of 5 Hz. I'm going to assign Aftertouch as rate control. So while I'm in the rate control box, I'm holding Enter and pressing into the key. Aftertouch, labeled Press, now controls the speed of the LFO between 3 and 5 Hz. For the LFO shape, I'm going to select Sign. I'm now going to assign this on the DSP mod page. So under the controls for saw pitch, I'm going to assign this LFO which is set up to source 2. For depth control, I'm going to assign my aftertouch again. This way, I can bring in the pitch modulation of the LFO by pressing into the key and also have the LFO's rate get faster as I'm doing that. My minimum depth is going to be 12. With that, even when I'm not actively engaging my aftertouch, the LFO is still going to modulate the pitch by 12 cents at the minimum rate. So we have a constant change in pitch. Next, I'm going to set my max depth to 46. So as I press into the key, the extent of pitch modulation goes from 12 to 46 cents and the speed of the LFO goes from 3 to 5 Hz. Now for another instance of pitch variance, I'm going to combine the mod wheel and a random value using a function. So back on the LFO plus page, I'm going to set up function 1 as follows. So input A for function 1 is going to be the mod wheel. So I'm making my assignment by holding enter and then moving the mod wheel. Since I want a randomized value for input B, I'm going to select grand1. In my function box, which lets me choose how the mod wheel and randomizer interact, I'm going to select A multiplied by B. What this means is the MIDI value of the mod wheel gets multiplied by the randomized value. So when the mod wheel is at its lowest position, the function is going to output a value of 0. I'm not going to hear any pitch variance from this function at that point. As I turn up the mod wheel, it gets multiplied by the random value. So when I do that, I get a higher modulation value. Let's assign this function now on the DSP mod page. Under source 1 for the saw pitch, I'm going to assign function 1 and set 34 as my depth value. Now, let's set up some filters. I'm going to set up a low-pass filter that responds to velocity. We can then set up a more traditional filter section with a low-pass and a high-pass filter. So let's set this one up first. So back on the algorithm page, I'm going to select a low-pass filter. Back to DSP mod, I'm going to set the LP frequency to 37. Moving columns here, I'm going to set mod source 1 to attack velocity. I'm going to set the maximum possible depth value here. So the harder I hit the keys, the more the filter opens up. But with such a high depth value, the filter stays fairly open at my regular playing velocity. Let me show you what I mean. Now to set up my master filter section, I'm going to take everything from this layer and route that into a new layer. I can then set up my filters and their physical controllers directly in that second layer. I can do this with the cascade or alt input feature, where you can feed the output of one layer into the input of another. First, I'm going to duplicate this layer. In this new duplicated layer, I'm going to go to the algorithm page. I'm selecting number 106 and setting the alt input value to layer 1. So the input for this layer is being taken directly from layer 1. Now, I'm going to select a 2-pole low-pass filter block and follow that with a 2-pole high-pass filter. Now, I'm going to set some controls for the filter cutoff and resonance values. Going to DSP mod, I'm selecting LP frequency and turning the frequency value all the way down. Next, I'm moving to source 1 and assigning slider 5 by holding enter and moving it. For depth, I'm setting the highest possible value. So this slider is now going to go from the lowest filter cutoff to a fully open filter. I'm going to make sure I cancel out these other assignments that I duplicated. Next, I'm going to select LP resonance, go to source 1, and assign knob 5 by holding enter and moving the knob. I want to add 5 dB of resonance with this knob, so I'm setting my depth value to 5. Using the same basic concept for my high-pass filter, I want to quickly assign slider 6 and knob 6. So I'm turning the high-pass frequency down all the way, moving to source 1 for high-pass frequency, assigning slider 6 by holding enter, and then setting my depth value. I'm now going to move to the resonance value for the high pass filter. Moving to source 1, I'm going to hold enter and move knob 6. Again, my depth value is going to be 5. Now here's a step you don't want to forget when you've got an alt input or using the cascade feature. I'm going to go back to layer 1 and turn the level of that layer all the way down. This is to make sure I don't hear signal from both layers. Since the output of layer 1 is going into the input of layer 2, what I want to hear is the final process sound coming from the second layer. So we're done with our oscillator and filter, but it's still quite a basic sound. We're still missing all those soundscape elements you heard at the beginning. This is where the effects engine comes in. So let's go to the effects page. I'm going to select the first preset. Now press edit. First, some reverb. I'm going to select number 53, labeled Opera House. Since I'll be setting up physical controllers for all my effects units, let's go to the Mod 1 page. I'll be selecting effects parameters for each box or unit in my effects chain. I'm then going to assign my physical controller in the source box by holding enter and then moving the controller. For my reverb, I'll first be setting up my dry-wet control. So select the parameter, set the adjust value to 0, and then assign slider 9 while I'm in the source box. I'm going to set a depth value of 74%. So that's the max wet value I'll have when the slider is all the way up. Since the adjust value is 0, I'll only get the dry signal when slider 9 is all the way down. Since we know what all these boxes are now, let's quickly assign knob 9 to reverb time. So I'm selecting my box number, setting reverb time as my parameter, and setting my adjust value to 2.9 seconds. Once I've assigned my knob, my depth value is going to be 4.8. Next, the classic chorus effect. On the main effects page, I'm going to hit Insert Post. In this new effects box, I'll be selecting number 205. Now back on the mod page, I'll be selecting box 2, which is my chorus, and then selecting the left dry wet parameter. My adjust value is going to be 0. Now in the source box, I'm going to hold enter and then move knob 7 to assign it. I'm going to set a depth value of 74%. Since the stereo chorus has separate left and right channel controls, I'm going to do all the same steps for the right channel in the next column. I'll be using the same adjust value and the same knob control for this one. I'm going to set my depth value to 50%. Now for some more interesting sonic effects. I'll be setting up 3 different delay units on the main page. I'll then be setting up physical controllers for them. First, I'm going to add 3 more effects boxes. My first delay unit is going to be effect number 160. Now on the mod page, I'll be setting up slider 8 as a dry-wet control. So I'm setting my box number, selecting the dry-wet parameter, setting my adjust value to 0, assigning slider 8 by holding enter and then moving the slider, and set my depth at 74%. My next delay unit is going to be number 186. This one's going to give me some warping textures. I want to bring this effect in on occasion, but only a small part of the wet signal. For this, I'm going to assign the variation button, almost like an on-off switch. So on the mod page, I'm going to select box 4, select the dry-wet parameter, set my adjust value to 0, so that's the value when variation is off. Assign my switch by holding enter and pressing variation, and set my depth value to 5%. Back on the main effects page, my final delay unit is going to be number 179. Now on the mod page, I'm going to select box number 5, select the parameter I want, set the adjust value to 0, and then assign the mod wheel as my source. My depth value is going to be 50%. Now if you remember, we previously assigned the mod wheel to pitch modulation on the oscillator. So with this new assignment in the effects engine, the mod wheel is controlling both pitch modulation and this delay unit. With that, let's do a short demo of the entire patch with all the programming we've done so far. Before you leave this screen, make sure you save the effects chain we just made. And also, save the program before you fully leave edit mode. And there we have it. We've taken a simple saw wave and filter, which is pretty much a basic starter sound on a Juno, and we've given that all this texture and range. Between that and all the controller assignments, we're able to cover so many different sound types, all with one single layer. And if you want, you can download the patch we just made using the link in the video description. Be sure to come back for the next video. We'll be making the entire structure of the Juno exactly the way it is. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.